So if you've scrolled through the channel even briefly or poorly, you'll know that we have a lot of different content here when it comes to building in Terraria. So I've got things around, well, tutorials, I've got some thoughts on some upcoming updates, I've even got, well, 3D builds and some anime stuff and kind of anything in between. But today I'll be doing something very different, something I've never done before, something, well, new. That's right, I did something I probably shouldn't have, so hold on to your hats. Hey Terraria fans, welcome back to another speed build video. Guys, in this one I will be doing something very new and probably something that has not been done before, I don't think, or at least not in the same way that I'm thinking. I'm taking the elements of things I've done, our 3D builds, as well as other things I've done, our anime builds, and I'm just basically just mushing them together to make a 3D build from an anime. Now you're probably thinking, well, Tommy, you've done 3D builds and you've done anime builds, so what's the big deal? The big deal, in my opinion, is you're taking an element from a show that's 2D, turning it 3D, and then also still trying to do it justice by still making it look very much like the original. Now, if you're actually wondering what I built, guys, I decided to go with the Kame House from Dragon Ball, or Dragon Ball Z, I guess, depending which show you're more familiar with, and it's a really kind of basic house that sits out on its little sandy island. I thought it would be perfect, I thought it would be easy. It was okay, but the point is I got a little bit better at 3D building, and overall I think you're going to like the final product. Now before we get into the build, guys, a couple of housekeeping items. As always, if you want to actually catch me building any of these things live, please feel free to hop into the Twitch or the YouTube, because we're multi-streaming now. I'll be live streaming on Tuesdays or Thursdays, usually around 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, so we'd love to have you there. Get your comments, get your thoughts, that kind of thing. Additionally, guys, if you like this video, either up to this point or at the end, please feel free to hit the like or the subscribe, or just leave a comment down below. It does really help the channel, and we are trying to get this out to, I guess, a wider audience of folks, so any help is appreciated. And finally, guys, as always, I will be covering all of the materials at the end of this video, so stay tuned until then to, well, see all the materials, how I use them, and maybe get a bit more insight into the actual build. Anyways, with all that said, guys, let's hop in the build, shall we? Alright, so with like any other build that I make, I generally try to get a basic outline of what I'm making, but because this is 3D, I decided I would start with some of the side pieces first, just so I could get the roof started. So by making the frame of the house and this A-frame on the right side, it gave me the landmarks I needed to actually put together a roof to the side, which basically requires a lot of extra length. Now, I originally went with shingles, and I think I actually swapped these out a little bit later for walls and for some platforms, but you could do either in this instance. The Dynasty shingles and everything else I'm using here are obviously replaceable at any point in time, but you will see that I eventually put some platforms and some copper brick wall behind it. I then went in with the boreal wall just to kind of fill everything in and kind of start to get a better idea of what I was going to be using. Once I did eventually land on using these platforms and walls as the main roof section, the big thing here was to actually make this additional piece hang out or stand out a little bit more. So it was a bit too shallow, and I needed to increase the length of it. This is a really important thing when you're making 3D. The way you do length and the way you make things sort of pop out from the side is what's really going to make a big difference, in my opinion. I'm still not great at it, so I had to do this a couple times in this design, but I do think by the time we landed on our final structure that you sort of see here, it actually looks pretty good. Once I got the length and the sort of depth of this window or roof and window done, I then moved to the other side of the roof where I just kind of continued the same design. Again, I decided to use shingles here, but you could use pretty much whatever you like. I just really think that this helps separate away from the rest of the build. Now, you will see that I fill also the entire build with boreal wall here. It's not necessarily what I think is going to be the final product. I already know that going in, but I'm just trying to sort of differentiate everything and just kind of make this look a little bit more interesting for now. It helps with my brain to understand what is going to be 3D and what's going to go where. You'll be seeing a couple parts where I paint white and others I paint gray. That's to give this build a little bit more depth and some angles, that kind of thing. Now this side window here is really tricky. It took me actually a little bit longer than it shows here in the speed build to get that thing together. It never really felt right. This other window with the shutters was actually not so bad. I just couldn't decide on how I wanted to have the glass or the windows come through. Initially I tried it with normal glass, then I tried with a couple of other materials. I ended up settling on, I think, the Gemspark, the offline purple, and the offline orange one, which is, I believe, the amethyst and the amber one in combination. And then as I decided to change the walls out, I actually went with the palm wood fence here. I actually really like the way this looks as a texture, so I went with this, painted it pink. I tried purple, I tried, I believe, deep pink as well. We just kind of mixed and matched some of the colors, and then I went went on the side and painted it the same. This sort of depth of color, I guess, and the different patterns does help distinguish it a bit more. You can see that left side is obviously shadowed and darker, which works totally fine. And then I went in with some different paints and just kind of sorted everything out, tried to make some shutters, that kind of thing. But ultimately, I will say I did settle on a final color that was just this pink and deep pink color. It looks pretty good overall. It's not perfect, but you know, as always, you're going to do some experimentation with any of your builds. Anyways, the rest of the design is not that complicated. By the end of this, you'll see that I kind of add a bit more sections to the door. I write Kame House on the top, go with a nice green door, and try to add a few other little elements. But this is kind of the overall sort of theme of this build, a little bit of experimentation and just trying different things that sort of match the original concept. So with that and a bit of additional detail, guys, this build comes together and I think the final product looks pretty good. So with that, I'll leave you guys to watch the rest of this and we'll see you on the back end. Alright, so with the iconic Kame House done from Dragon Ball Z, I'm going to go ahead and cover all of the materials like I promised at the beginning of this video. Now, as always, I do encourage you to pause the video here if you'd like to get a closer look at any of the materials or just have a sort of a cheat sheet in case you're trying to make something similar or a carbon copy. But all that said, guys, as you can see, there's not a ton of actual materials. I mean, when it comes to the walls, we really use something like cobalt brick, some crystal block, and some basic wood types like ash wood, normal wood, and some boreal wood along with ebon wood wall. So nothing too crazy. It's very low in the selection. Then we also use some palm wood fence and some rich mahogany fence. So pretty simple when it came to the actual design. I think this is really important to do when you're doing 3D builds, especially if you're not very good at them like me. I think this was actually a bit of a step up in a quality for me in terms of just kind of making something a bit more basic. Now, when it came to the actual roof design, I did go with my copper brick wall painted a red or deep red. I just like this one for roofing and shingles. I think it looks nice under some platforms, so that's kind of what we decided to go with. Now, similar to these walls, our block choices were also pretty simple. I went with some wooden beams, some boreal wood, well, a lot of boreal wood, a bit of spooky wood, some boreal beams as well as some red dynasty shingles, and then we used a little bit of silly green balloon, some silly purple balloon, as well as some pumpkin, which I did use simply for the umbrellas. So again, I really only used 8 different materials when it came to blocks, which is pretty limited. And again, you could switch this out for anything that you think works well, but this is the choice that I went with. Now, where things get a little bit more hectic is definitely with the paints. I went a little crazy, but this is actually not uncommon, in my opinion, when you do a 3D build. I decided I want to go with the kind of actual look that you see for Kame House in Dragon Ball Z, which is this sort of pink and white look. So we definitely went with our pink and deep pink paint as well as some white paint, but that means we needed some gray paint for some shadowing, and then I needed some deep red and red paint for the roof just to make it look a little bit more interesting. I then went with some yellow, some deep sky blue, some brown paint, some blue paint, and some deep green paint. And I think overall it actually looks pretty good, so I am pretty happy with the color palette for the most part. I think combining it with our palm wood fence for the lighter, brighter side of the wall made it look pretty good, and I'm pretty happy with the final result. And yeah, that's pretty much going to cover it for all of the materials, guys, so let's go ahead and move on with the rest of the video. All right, guys, so there you go. There is our final product. The Kame House is now done. It is a nice combination of our 3D work with our anime stuff. It's a good combination. Like I said, I just think it looks good. It has a simple design, which really helps me because I'm still not that great at 3D building. And overall, it just kind of looks like, well, the original from the show. And of course, we're adding our own little details and features, but it just, I don't know, it just has that right feel. I will say that probably my favorite part of this design is the overhang where the door is, and just that whole feel there. Just, I don't know, it feels really kind of quaint and cozy, and I just like the way that it turned out. It has the right feel that I didn't really necessarily think I would be able to get on my first try. Though that said, I think we could have done a little bit of a better job with making the foreground with the water stand out and letting some light pass through there. There's ways to do that. I probably should have thought of that, although I think I thought of it after the fact. So little mistake there, but it's not too big of a deal. I think, like I said, overall, I'm pretty happy with the final product. But as always, guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. What did you like? What would you change? Or what would you maybe try to make as a version of this for another show or another 3D build? Or if you have any suggestions for something you'd like to see in the future. And with that, guys, we're done. So thank you so much for watching until the end of this video. And as always, thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. We will see you in the next one.